Every great invention, every breakthrough, and every leap forward in history began with a single thought. But not just any thought, a thought tested, refined, and sharpened by the power of critical thinking. Imagine if you could harness that same power, not just to solve problems, but transform your entire life. This book will show you how. Introduction. Welcome to the Critical Thinkers. Change the way you think. Change your life. This is not just a book about thinking. It's a guide to reprogramming your mind for clarity, strength, and success. Written and published by the Voice Library, this journey will help you sharpen your reasoning, master problem solving, and make decisions that align with your highest potential. Critical thinking isn't about knowing more facts. It's about knowing how to use what you know. In a world full of noise, opinions, and distractions, the ability to think clearly is your greatest superpower. Chapter 1. The Power of Thinking Differently. When we look at history, it is easy to see that progress has never been built by those who simply followed the path laid out before them. The individuals who changed the world, the ones whose names are remembered centuries later, were those who had the courage to think differently. They refused to accept what everyone else assumed to be true, and they dared to ask questions that others considered either too simple or too dangerous. Their strength was not only in their knowledge, but in their ability to approach problems with a critical and independent mind. Socrates, for example, lived in ancient Athens at a time when tradition and authority were rarely questioned, yet he made it his mission to challenge people to examine their own beliefs. Instead of lecturing about what he thought was right, he asked questions. His method, which came to be known as the Socratic method, was a way of peeling back layers of assumption to get to the heart of truth. To his fellow citizens, this was unsettling. People prefer certainty, and they feel safe when they can lean on commonly accepted answers. Socrates disrupted that comfort by asking, "How do you know, and what do you mean by that?" His way of thinking forced others to slow down and truly examine whether what they believed was logical, fair, or simply inherited from tradition. Centuries later, the spirit of questioning assumptions continued to drive progress. When Galileo looked at the stars through a telescope, he saw evidence that contradicted the teachings of the time. The idea that Earth was the center of the universe had been accepted for generations, and to disagree with it was to challenge both science and religion. Yet Galileo trusted his own observations more than long-standing dogma. By doing so, he paid a heavy personal price, but his insistence on thinking differently reshaped humanity's understanding of the cosmos. What seemed unthinkable in his day became the foundation for modern science. Fast forward to more recent times, and we see the same pattern. Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, was famous not for inventing entirely new technologies, but for seeing them in ways others did not. Computers, music players, and phones already existed. What Jobs did was challenge the assumption that they had to remain complicated, uninspiring, or limited to a single function. He envisioned tools that were not only useful, but beautiful, intuitive, and designed with the human experience in mind. That way of thinking differently transformed industries and changed how billions of people live their daily lives. So why is thinking differently so powerful? At its core, it is because innovation is born from questions, not answers. Progress comes when someone refuses to accept that things must remain the way they are. Thinking differently allows us to step outside the patterns that keep us trapped in routine and to see possibilities that others overlook. Most people move through life on what can be called mental autopilot. They rely on habits of thought formed years earlier, repeating assumptions passed down by parents, teachers, culture, or tradition. While autopilot thinking is comfortable, it limits growth. When we accept things without examination, we miss opportunities for change and improvement. Critical thinking invites us to turn off that autopilot and take control of our minds. It does not mean rejecting everything we know, but it does mean asking deeper questions. Why do I believe this? Where did this idea come from? Is there evidence that supports it? Or am I just accepting it because it feels familiar? This process may feel uncomfortable at first, because questioning beliefs can create uncertainty, yet within that uncertainty lies freedom. When we test assumptions instead of blindly following them, we open the door to clarity and better choices. To think differently also requires courage. It is rarely easy to stand apart from the majority. Many people fear being judged or rejected if they voice a perspective that contradicts common thinking. That fear keeps entire groups and even societies locked in old patterns. But every significant breakthrough in human history began with someone willing to challenge what others considered normal. From abolishing harmful social practices to inventing life-changing technologies, progress always starts with a mind that dares to ask, what if there is another way? This shift in thinking does not always need to be grand or world-changing. It can happen in everyday life. Imagine someone stuck in a job they dislike. On autopilot, they may tell themselves, this is just the way life is. Work is supposed to be miserable, but a critical thinker asks, is that really true? Is there a different path I could take? What skills do I have that could open new doors? That one moment of questioning can lead to life-altering decisions. In relationships too, thinking differently can transform outcomes. Many people respond to conflict with the same habits they saw growing up, whether that means avoiding problems, reacting with anger, or holding grudges. But a critical thinker pauses and considers, what is really happening here? What does this person need? How can I approach this in a way that creates understanding instead of more division? By breaking free of automatic reactions, they create healthier and more meaningful connections. Even in simple day-to-day decisions, thinking differently can sharpen our awareness. We may assume that buying the most expensive product means it must be the best, or that following the majority's opinion ensures safety. But critical thinking teaches us to slow down, weigh evidence, and look beyond appearances. This does not just lead to better decisions, it builds confidence. When you learn to trust your own process of reasoning, you no longer feel dependent on others to tell you what to believe or how to act. The most important lesson here is that thinking differently is not about being rebellious for the sake of rebellion. It is not about opposing others simply to stand out. Instead, it is about developing the discipline to look at situations with fresh eyes. It is about training your mind to avoid shortcuts, to resist rushing to conclusions, and to remain curious. True critical thinkers do not claim to have all the answers. Instead, they cultivate the habit of asking better questions. Imagine how different the world would look if more people thought this way. Problems in society would not be dismissed as too complicated, but examined with patience and creativity. Arguments would be less about who is right and more about what is true. Opportunities would be noticed where others see only obstacles. This is the promise of thinking differently. It is not magic. It is simply the practice of paying closer attention, questioning more deeply, and refusing to accept limitations that have never been tested. The power of thinking differently is available to everyone. It does not require genius, wealth, or status. It only requires the willingness to pause, to ask, and to look beyond what is immediately obvious. When you choose to think differently, you are choosing to live deliberately. You are choosing to shape your life with intention, rather than drift through it on borrowed beliefs. And that choice, simple as it may seem, is what separates those who make history from those who merely observe it. In the chapters that follow, we will build on this foundation. You will learn not only how to identify the assumptions that shape your thinking, but also how to develop the skills to question, analyze, and evaluate with clarity. As you progress, you will discover that the ability to think differently is not reserved for rare moments of inspiration, but can become a way of life. And once it does, the way you see yourself, others, and the world will change forever. Chapter 2: The Anatomy of Critical Thinking. To understand how to think differently, we must first look closely at what critical thinking really is. Many people imagine that critical thinking is about being skeptical of everything or constantly questioning others. While curiosity and healthy doubt are part of it, critical thinking is far richer and more balanced. At its heart, it is the disciplined practice of examining information, weighing evidence, and forming judgments that are clear, logical, and fair. Critical thinking is not something mysterious or unreachable. It is simply the skill of using your mind in a more deliberate way. Think of it like a muscle. We all have it, but some people train it daily, while others leave it weak from lack of use. Just as an athlete trains different parts of the body to work together, a critical thinker trains the mind to combine analysis, evaluation, logic, and creativity. These parts are like the anatomy of critical thinking. Each one plays a vital role, but together they form a complete system. The first part is analysis. Analysis is the ability to break down information into smaller pieces to understand it better. Imagine receiving a piece of news or hearing a strong opinion. Instead of accepting it at face value, analysis asks, what exactly is being said? What are the main claims? What evidence is given to support them? By breaking the idea into its components, you begin to see it more clearly. Without analysis, information feels overwhelming, but with it, complexity becomes manageable. The second part is evaluation. Once you have broken something down, you must assess its quality. Is the evidence reliable? Are the sources credible? Is there hidden bias in the way the information is presented? Evaluation is like shining a light on the information to see if it holds up under scrutiny. Without evaluation, we are vulnerable to persuasion by clever words, emotional appeal, or misinformation. With evaluation, we become empowered to distinguish truth from illusion. The third part is logic. Logic connects the pieces together in a way that makes sense. It asks whether the conclusion follows from the evidence or if there are gaps in reasoning. Many arguments sound convincing at first, but fall apart when examined logically. For example, someone may say, "This new product is popular, so it must be the best." Logic teaches us to spot the flaw here. Popularity does not equal quality. By following logical patterns, we protect ourselves from false conclusions and strengthen our own reasoning. The fourth part is creativity. At first, creativity may not seem connected to critical thinking, but it is essential. Creativity allows us to imagine possibilities that are not immediately obvious. It enables us to combine information in new ways, to see connections others overlook, and to design solutions to complex problems. Without creativity, critical thinking can become rigid and mechanical. With it, we gain flexibility, adaptability, and the ability to think beyond the ordinary. These four parts, analysis, evaluation, logic, and creativity, make up the anatomy of critical thinking. When they work together, they form a powerful process that can guide every area of life. This process does not always need to be formal or time-consuming. It can be as simple as pausing to ask, what do I know for certain? What assumptions am I making? What alternatives might exist? Over time, these small habits of thought add up, reshaping the way we see the world. It is also important to understand what critical thinking is not. It is not about being negative or tearing down every idea you encounter. A person who constantly criticizes without offering solutions is not practicing critical thinking. They are practicing cynicism. Nor is it about being arrogant, assuming you are smarter than everyone else. True critical thinkers remain humble because they know that no matter how much they learn, there is always more to discover. They use critical thinking not to win arguments, but to get closer to truth. There is also a difference between reactive thinking and reflective thinking. Reactive thinking is what happens when we rely on our first instincts. Someone says something we dislike, and we respond immediately with anger. We see a headline and form an opinion without reading the details. Reactive thinking is quick, but it is shallow. Reflective thinking, on the other hand, is slower and more intentional. It takes time to consider all sides before forming a judgment. Critical thinking depends on reflective thinking because it allows us to move past surface impressions and dig deeper into meaning. Think about the way a detective investigates a mystery. They do not rush to accuse the first suspect they see. They gather evidence, analyze the details, evaluate the reliability of witnesses, follow logical connections, and sometimes even use creativity to imagine what could have happened. Only then do they form a conclusion. In many ways, critical thinking is like being a detective in your own life. You treat every piece of information with curiosity, but also with care. You do not assume, you investigate. To practice this, let us imagine a common situation. Deciding whether to trust a piece of news online. A reactive thinker might share the headline immediately, letting emotions drive the action. A critical thinker pauses. They analyze by asking, what exactly is the claim? They evaluate by checking the source. Is this a reliable website or just a random post? They apply logic. Does the argument make sense, or is it filled with emotional language and weak connections? Finally, they bring in creativity. What other explanations could there be? How might I test this claim? By walking through these steps, the critical thinker avoids being misled. The beauty of critical thinking is that it applies to every area of life. In work, it helps us solve problems more effectively and make stronger decisions. In relationships, it helps us listen more deeply and understand others beyond assumptions. In society, it helps us become responsible citizens who are not easily swayed by manipulation. When we practice it consistently, it becomes more than just a skill, it becomes a mindset. Developing this mindset does not happen overnight. It requires patience and practice, much like learning a new language or mastering a craft. At first, you may need to remind yourself to pause and question. Over time, it becomes natural. The more you use it, the sharper your thinking becomes. You begin to notice patterns in arguments, gaps in reasoning, and opportunities for improvement that once went unseen. Eventually, critical thinking is no longer something you do occasionally. It becomes part of who you are. The anatomy of critical thinking shows us that thinking well is not about raw intelligence. Many intelligent people make poor decisions because they never trained their minds to question and reflect. Critical thinking is about discipline, not just IQ. It is about choosing to think carefully when it would be easier to think quickly. It is about developing habits that protect you from being misled and guide you toward wiser choices. When you master the anatomy of critical thinking, you gain a powerful sense of independence. You no longer need to rely solely on the opinions of others. You become confident in your ability to examine, evaluate, and decide for yourself. This does not mean rejecting the wisdom of others, but it does mean you are no longer dependent on them. You learn to listen, but you also learn to test. You respect authority, but you are not enslaved by it. You value tradition, but you are not bound by it. You learn to think as your own person. This is the gift of critical thinking. It equips you not just to live in the world, but to engage with it wisely. In the chapters ahead, we will explore how to put this anatomy into practice in specific areas of life, from decision-making to problem-solving, from avoiding mental traps to navigating the complexity of the modern world. But for now, remember this: critical thinking is not one skill among many. It is the foundation upon which all other skills rest. Without it, we may learn facts, but we will not know how to use them. With it, we gain the ability to shape our lives with clarity, purpose, and strength. Chapter 3: Breaking Free from Mental Traps. One of the greatest obstacles to becoming a true critical thinker is not the lack of intelligence or education, but the invisible traps of the mind that quietly shape the way we see the world. These traps are so common that most of us walk through life unaware of them, and yet they hold tremendous power over our choices, our beliefs, and our actions. They are the shortcuts our brains take to save time and energy, and while sometimes useful, they often lead us away from truth and clarity. To master critical thinking, we must learn to recognize these mental traps, understand how they work, and develop strategies to break free from them. Perhaps the most well-known mental trap is confirmation bias. This is our tendency to look for information that supports what we already believe, while ignoring or dismissing anything that contradicts it. Imagine someone who strongly believes that a certain diet is the healthiest way to live. They will eagerly read articles, watch videos, and talk to others who agree with them, but they will skip over or argue against any evidence that challenges their view. Confirmation bias makes us feel comfortable because it reassures us that we are right, but in reality it blinds us from the full picture. Critical thinkers learn to resist this trap by deliberately seeking out different perspectives, especially those that make them uncomfortable. They understand that the truth does not always lie where our preferences point, and that growth comes from testing our beliefs, not protecting them. Another powerful mental trap is emotional reasoning. This occurs when we assume that because we feel strongly about something, it must be true. For instance, someone may feel deep fear about flying and therefore conclude that air travel is unsafe, even though statistics show it is one of the safest forms of transportation. Emotions are powerful guides in life, but they are not always reliable indicators of truth. Critical thinkers respect their emotions, but do not confuse them with evidence. They pause, step back, and ask, is my feeling about this situation the same as the reality of it, or could my feelings be clouding my judgment? Groupthink is another trap that quietly shapes human behavior. People often conform to the opinions of a group, even when they privately disagree, because the fear of standing out feels too heavy to bear. In workplaces, families, and communities, groupthink can silence voices of reason and stifle innovation. History is filled with tragic examples where societies followed harmful paths, simply because individuals did not want to challenge the majority. To break free from groupthink, critical thinkers practice independent thought. They listen carefully to others, but they also maintain the courage to hold a different view when necessary. They remember that truth is not determined by the number of people who believe it, but by the strength of the evidence that supports it. There are also subtle traps like overgeneralization. This happens when we take one example and apply it too broadly. For example, if someone has one negative experience with a person from a particular profession, they might conclude that all people in that profession are untrustworthy. Overgeneralization leads to stereotypes, prejudice, and shallow thinking. Critical thinkers learn to guard against it by asking, is this conclusion based on enough evidence? Or am I unfairly stretching one experience into a rule? By doing so, they protect themselves from building walls of assumption that limit their understanding of others. Another trap is called anchoring. Anchoring happens when we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we encounter, even when better information is available later. For example, if you are buying a car and the salesperson first mentions a very high price, that number may stick in your mind as the reference point, even if you later find more reasonable options. Anchoring is subtle, but it has a powerful influence on decisions. Critical thinkers train themselves to question first impressions and to keep looking until they have a fuller view of the situation. They remind themselves that the first answer is not always the best answer. One more common mental trap is the illusion of knowledge. This occurs when we think we know more than we actually do. Because information is everywhere today, it is easy to mistake quick access to facts for deep understanding. For example, reading a short article about medicine does not make someone a medical expert. Critical thinkers stay humble, they recognize the limits of their knowledge, and instead of pretending to know everything, they remain curious and open to learning more. This humility keeps them safe from overconfidence and poor decisions. Breaking free from these mental traps requires more than just awareness. It requires practice. One of the best practices is slowing down. Most traps take hold when we rush to conclusions without reflection. By giving ourselves space to pause and think, we create room to question our assumptions. Another practice is asking better questions. Instead of asking, "How can I prove I am right?" we ask, "What evidence would prove me wrong?" This shift is powerful because it prevents us from falling into the comfort of confirmation bias. It is also helpful to surround ourselves with people who think differently. If everyone around us agrees with us all the time, we are more likely to fall into groupthink and blind spots. But when we listen to diverse perspectives, even when they challenge us, we sharpen our own thinking. We do not have to accept every opinion we hear, but exposing ourselves to new angles protects us from being trapped inside the narrow circle of our own mind. Another way to escape mental traps is to practice reflective writing. By writing down our thoughts, reasons, and assumptions, we can see them more clearly. What may feel convincing in our heads often looks weaker when placed on paper. Writing forces us to slow down, to organize our ideas, and to notice the places where our reasoning may be thin or biased. Many great thinkers kept journals not just to record events, but to examine their own minds. Finally, we must remember that breaking free from mental traps is not about perfection. No one is completely free from bias, emotion, or shortcuts. Even the greatest thinkers fall into them at times. The difference is that critical thinkers are aware of these traps and keep working to catch themselves when they slip. It is about progress, not flawless purity. Each time we notice a bias, each time we question a generalization, each time we pause before reacting, we strengthen the habit of thinking more clearly. The human mind is powerful, but it is also vulnerable. By recognizing the traps that lie in wait, we reclaim control over our thinking. We begin to see not only the world more clearly, but ourselves as well. And with that clarity comes freedom. Freedom to choose wisely, to act with purpose, and to live a life shaped not by hidden biases, but by deliberate, thoughtful reasoning. This is the essence of breaking free from mental traps, not just seeing differently, but living differently. Chapter 4: Decision-making with clarity. Every day of our lives is filled with decisions. Some are small: what to eat for breakfast, which shirt to wear, which route to take to work. Others carry more weight: whether to accept a new job, invest money, start a relationship, or end one. Taken together, these decisions shape the course of our lives. Yet many people make them quickly, based on habit, impulse, or the influence of others, without giving much thought to the process. The result is that they often feel uncertain, regretful, or even stuck in choices that do not serve them well. Critical thinking offers us a way to step beyond guesswork and hasty reactions. It provides a path toward making decisions with clarity. Clarity means being able to see the situation fully, to weigh it fairly, and to choose with confidence, rather than fear or confusion. When we approach decisions with clarity, we are not guaranteed perfection. Life always carries uncertainty, but we dramatically improve our chances of moving in the right direction. The first step toward clear decision-making is slowing down. In a fast-moving world, we are encouraged to act quickly, to seize opportunities before they pass, to go with our gut. Intuition has its place, but when decisions carry lasting consequences, rushing can be dangerous. Slowing down allows us to look at the decision from multiple angles. It creates a pause in which we can examine the facts, reflect on our values, and ask whether our initial impulse is truly the best guide. Next comes gathering information. A decision based on limited knowledge is like trying to build a house on weak foundations. The more complete our understanding of the situation, the stronger our choice will be. This does not mean drowning ourselves in endless data, but it does mean making the effort to seek reliable, balanced sources of information. For example, if you are deciding whether to take a new job, it is not enough to look at the salary. You also need to consider the work environment, the opportunities for growth, the stability of the company, and how the role aligns with your long-term goals. But information alone is not enough. We must also learn to evaluate it. Not all information is equal. Some sources are trustworthy, others are misleading. Some evidence is strong, some is weak. Clear decision-making requires us to ask, where does this information come from? What motives might influence it? Is it supported by facts, or is it based on assumption and opinion? By weighing the quality of the information, we protect ourselves from being misled by appearances or persuasion. Once we have gathered and evaluated information, we must apply logic. Logic is the thread that connects the pieces together in a meaningful way. It helps us see whether the conclusions we are drawing truly follow from the evidence we have. For instance, suppose you are deciding whether to buy a house. You might think, this neighborhood is popular, so buying here must be a good investment. Logic reminds us to ask whether popularity today will necessarily mean value tomorrow. By spotting gaps or leaps in reasoning, we keep our decisions grounded in reality rather than assumption. Another essential part of decision-making is considering alternatives. One of the most common mistakes people make is assuming that they must choose between only two options, yes or no, this or that. In reality, there are often many more possibilities waiting to be explored. A critical thinker learns to ask, what other options exist that I have not considered? This simple question opens the mind to creativity and flexibility. Sometimes the best solution is not found in the obvious choices, but in a path that lies between them. At the same time, clarity requires us to align our decisions with our values. Information, logic, and alternatives help us see the external aspects of a decision, but values connect us to what matters most within. A job may offer high pay, but if it demands sacrificing time with family, is it truly the best choice for you? A relationship may seem convenient, but if it does not align with your need for respect and growth, will it bring you happiness in the long term? When our decisions reflect our values, they lead to greater satisfaction and peace of mind. Of course, every decision carries uncertainty. No matter how carefully we prepare, we cannot predict the future with complete accuracy. This is where courage becomes part of clarity. A critical thinker learns to accept that perfect certainty is impossible. Instead of fearing mistakes, they focus on making the best decision possible with the information they have, while staying open to learning and adjusting as needed. Clarity does not mean eliminating risk. It means understanding it, preparing for it, and facing it with confidence rather than fear. An example can make this process clearer. Imagine you are offered a chance to start a business with a friend. At first, excitement takes over. The idea of being your own boss feels liberating, but instead of rushing ahead, you apply critical thinking. You slow down, you gather information. What is the market like? What costs are involved? You evaluate, is your friend reliable and experienced? You apply logic. Does the business model truly make sense, or are there weak points? You consider alternatives. Could you test the idea on a smaller scale before committing fully? Finally, you reflect on your values. Does this align with the life you want to build, or does it carry sacrifices that outweigh the potential rewards? By following this process, your decision will not be based on excitement alone, but on a clear, balanced view of the situation. Another important aspect of decision-making with clarity is learning to manage emotions. Emotions can be powerful forces that push us toward quick choices. Fear may cause us to avoid risks that could have been rewarding. Anger may lead us to make decisions we later regret. Desire may cause us to overlook warning signs. Clear decision-making does not ignore emotions, but it does not let them rule. It involves noticing the emotion, acknowledging it, and then asking, is this feeling giving me accurate guidance, or is it clouding my judgment? By creating space between emotion and action, we regain control over our choices. It is also useful to think about consequences. Every decision carries results, both immediate and long-term. Critical thinkers learn to look ahead and ask, if I choose this path, what are the likely outcomes tomorrow, next year, or even 10 years from now? This forward-looking perspective helps prevent regret and ensures that choices are made with awareness of their impact. Finally, clarity in decision-making comes from reflection. After making a choice, we take time to look back and learn. Did the decision bring the results we hoped for? What worked well in our process? What could we do differently next time? Reflection transforms every decision, whether successful or not, into a lesson that strengthens our future choices. Decision-making with clarity is not about finding perfect answers. It is about building a process that allows us to see clearly, choose wisely, and move forward with confidence. When we slow down, gather information, evaluate carefully, apply logic, consider alternatives, align with values, manage emotions, and reflect on outcomes, we transform decision-making from a source of anxiety into a source of empowerment. The truth is that every life is shaped by decisions, and the quality of our decisions shapes the quality of our lives. By practicing critical thinking in our choices, we move closer to living intentionally rather than accidentally. We no longer drift on the current of impulse, pressure, or confusion. Instead, we steer our own course with clarity and purpose. Chapter 5. Problem solving like a pro. Life in many ways can be seen as a series of problems to be solved. Some problems are small and quickly resolved: a flat tire on the way to work, a misunderstanding with a colleague, or a minor financial setback. Others are larger and more complex: the challenge of finding meaningful work, managing personal health, or navigating relationships that are filled with tension. Still others reach beyond the individual, touching entire communities or even the world, such as climate change, inequality, or technological disruption. No matter who we are or where we live, problems are an unavoidable part of existence. The difference between those who struggle endlessly and those who move forward with confidence often comes down to one thing: how effectively they solve problems. Problem solving is not just about fixing what is broken. It is about learning to approach challenges with clarity, creativity, and resilience. When mastered, it transforms difficulties into opportunities. Instead of feeling defeated by obstacles, we begin to see them as puzzles waiting to be unlocked. This mindset does not make life easy, but it does make it manageable and even exciting. To become a true critical thinker, one must become a skilled problem solver. The first step in problem solving is defining the problem clearly. This may sound obvious, but many mistakes happen right here. People often rush to solutions without fully understanding what the real problem is. For example, imagine a company where sales are declining. Leaders may assume the problem is poor advertising, so they increase their marketing budget. But if the deeper issue is that the product no longer meets customer needs, then all the advertising in the world will not help. Defining the problem means asking, what exactly is happening? What is the gap between where we are and where we want to be? What evidence shows that this is the true issue? A clearly defined problem is like a well-drawn map. It points us in the right direction. Once the problem is defined, the next step is breaking it down. Big problems often feel overwhelming, but when we divide them into smaller parts, they become manageable. Take, for example, the challenge of paying off a large debt. At first, the total amount may seem impossible, but when broken down into monthly targets, paired with steps like reducing expenses or finding additional income sources, the path forward becomes clearer. Breaking problems into parts also reveals which areas require the most urgent attention and which can be addressed later. After breaking down the problem, it is time to identify the root cause. Many people waste time solving symptoms rather than causes. If you have a headache every day, taking painkillers may bring relief, but if the root cause is poor sleep or stress, the problem will keep returning. Critical thinkers use methods such as the 5 whys, asking why repeatedly until they uncover the underlying reason. For instance, If a machine in a factory keeps breaking down, one might ask, why did it stop? Because a part wore out. Why did the part wear out? Because it was not properly maintained. Why was it not maintained? Because there is no maintenance schedule. The real problem then is not the broken machine, but the lack of a system for maintenance. By identifying root causes, we solve problems at their source, preventing them from recurring. With the problem defined and the root cause identified, the next step is generating possible solutions. This is where creativity becomes essential. Often the first idea that comes to mind is not the best one. Skilled problem solvers resist the urge to stop at the first option. They brainstorm multiple possibilities, no matter how unusual they may seem. In brainstorming, judgment is suspended at first. The goal is to generate quantity, because even wild ideas can spark practical ones. Later evaluation comes in. The key question shifts to, which solutions are realistic, effective, and aligned with our goals? Creativity opens doors that logic alone may not reveal, but logic ensures that only the strongest ideas move forward. Once solutions are generated, the process of evaluation begins. Here, the strengths and weaknesses of each option are carefully considered. What resources will this solution require? What risks might it carry? What benefits could it bring? Both short-term and long-term. Sometimes it helps to create a simple chart comparing options side by side. Other times, it is useful to run small experiments before committing fully. For example, before opening a new business, one might test the idea on a smaller scale, such as launching a pilot program. This step reduces risk and provides valuable feedback that sharpens the final decision. After choosing a solution, the next stage is implementation. Many people reach this point but fail to act because of fear, procrastination, or perfectionism. But without action, even the best solution remains just an idea. Implementation requires planning. Who will do what? By when? What resources are needed? It also requires courage to accept that no plan is flawless. Mistakes may happen, but they are part of the process. Implementation is where solutions come alive and where progress is truly made. Equally important is the final step: evaluation and reflection. Once a solution is implemented, it is essential to ask, did it solve the problem? What worked well? What could be improved? Reflection ensures that each problem becomes a source of learning, even if the first attempt did not bring perfect results. In fact, some of the greatest innovations in history were born from failures that revealed valuable lessons. Thomas Edison famously tested thousands of materials before discovering the right filament for the light bulb. Each failure was not wasted effort, but a step toward the solution. Problem solving also requires resilience. Not every solution will work the first time, and some problems may take multiple attempts to resolve. Resilience means not giving up too quickly, but also not clinging stubbornly to failing strategies. It is the balance of persistence and adaptability. Critical thinkers view setbacks as feedback, not as final defeats. They adjust, refine, and try again until progress is made. To see problem solving in action, consider the story of the Apollo 13 mission. When an oxygen tank exploded on the spacecraft, the lives of the astronauts were at risk. The problem was urgent and complex. The team at NASA had to think quickly, define the real issues, and generate creative solutions with limited resources. At one point, they had to figure out how to fit a square filter into a round opening to clean the air supply. Using only the materials available on the spacecraft, engineers devised a solution that kept the crew alive. This story shows that problem solving is not just an academic exercise. It is a skill that can mean the difference between failure and survival. On a more personal scale, imagine someone facing a strained relationship with a friend. The problem may appear to be constant arguments, but the root cause might be a lack of honest communication. By stepping back, defining the problem clearly, and exploring different approaches, Perhaps scheduling a calm conversation, seeking counseling, or setting healthy boundaries, the person can begin to address the true issue rather than the surface conflict. In this way, critical problem solving can restore not just peace of mind, but the strength of human connections. Ultimately, becoming a skilled problem solver means adopting a mindset of curiosity and persistence. It means viewing problems not as threats, but as opportunities to learn, grow, and create. Every challenge carries within it the seed of improvement. When we develop the ability to define problems clearly, identify root causes, generate and test solutions, and reflect on outcomes, we equip ourselves with tools that apply to every area of life. Problem solving like a pro is not about always having the right answer immediately. It is about building a process that leads us closer to solutions, step by step. It is about trusting that no matter how complex a challenge may seem, there is a way forward if we are willing to look carefully, think creatively, and act boldly. This ability turns obstacles into stepping stones, transforming difficulties into pathways toward growth. By practicing problem solving in small matters every day, we prepare ourselves for the larger challenges that life will inevitably bring. And when those challenges arrive, we will not shrink back in fear, but step forward with the confidence of someone who knows no problem is unsolvable when approached with clarity, logic, and determination. Chapter 6. Thinking in a complex world. The world we live in today is more connected, more fast-moving, and more complex than at any time in human history. Information flows across our screens at lightning speed. Opinions, facts, and misinformation blend together in a constant stream, making it difficult to know what to trust. Global challenges such as climate change, technological disruption, and political instability remind us daily that the issues we face are rarely simple. Even our personal lives are touched by this complexity. Decisions about careers, relationships, and values are influenced not only by our immediate circumstances, but by forces on the other side of the planet. In such a world, the ability to think critically is not just useful, it is essential. Without it, we become overwhelmed by noise, swept away by trends, or paralyzed by uncertainty. With it, we develop the tools to navigate complexity with calm, clarity, and confidence. Thinking in a complex world does not mean having all the answers. It means learning how to handle uncertainty, how to evaluate competing perspectives, and how to find a steady path, even when everything around us feels uncertain. One of the first challenges of complexity is the sheer volume of information. We live in an age often described as the information age, but it might also be called the disinformation age. Anyone with a smartphone has access to more data than kings or scholars had in centuries past. But quantity does not equal quality. Alongside reliable knowledge comes misinformation, propaganda, and shallow commentary. For someone unprepared, this flood of information can lead to confusion or blind acceptance of whatever feels most appealing. Critical thinkers approach information with a careful, questioning eye. They ask, who is providing this information? What evidence supports it? What motives might be behind it? By filtering information in this way, they separate signal from noise, truth from falsehood. This challenge is not new, but it is magnified today. In earlier times, people relied on local sources of knowledge, elders, teachers, books in libraries. While those sources were not perfect, they were limited, and that limitation made filtering easier. Today, anyone can publish an opinion to the world within seconds, and the loudest voices often drown out the most careful ones. To think critically in this environment means resisting the temptation to be swayed by volume or speed. It means remembering that truth is not always the first thing we see, and wisdom is rarely found in slogans. Another dimension of complexity is the global nature of modern problems. Consider climate change. It is not simply an environmental issue. It involves science, economics, politics, culture, and ethics. Solutions cannot be found by looking at one dimension alone. They require cooperation across nations, disciplines, and generations. For an individual, this can feel overwhelming, but critical thinking provides a way to approach such issues without despair. It teaches us to break down complexity into parts, to examine causes and effects, and to recognize how small actions contribute to larger systems. Similarly, technology creates complexity. New inventions transform society faster than we can fully understand their impact. Social media, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, each brings opportunities and risks. Without critical thinking, it is easy to fall into extremes, blind enthusiasm that embraces every new development without question, or fearful resistance that rejects change altogether. A critical thinker avoids both traps. They ask, what benefits does this technology bring? What potential harms might it cause? How can we maximize the good while reducing the risks? They recognize that progress is not simple, and thoughtful engagement is necessary to guide it wisely. Complexity also shows itself in human relationships. In a diverse world, we encounter people with different cultures, values, and beliefs. Misunderstandings can arise easily, and conflicts can escalate when we assume that our way is the only right way. Thinking critically in relationships means learning to listen deeply, to question our own assumptions, and to see situations from multiple perspectives. It means understanding that people's choices are often shaped by experiences we do not share, and that solutions to conflict require empathy as well as logic. In this way, critical thinking becomes not just an intellectual skill, but a social one, helping us build bridges where others see only barriers. A key skill for thinking in a complex world is systems thinking. Systems thinking is the ability to see how parts connect to form a whole. For example, if a city faces traffic congestion, the problem is not only about roads. It may involve housing policies, public transportation, job locations, and even cultural habits about driving. A narrow solution such as adding more lanes may only make the problem worse over time. Systems thinking helps us recognize these connections, anticipate consequences, and design solutions that address root causes rather than symptoms. Another skill is the tolerance of ambiguity. In a complex world, not everything will be clear. We will encounter situations where evidence points in different directions, where experts disagree, or where outcomes cannot be predicted with certainty. Many people find this ambiguity unbearable, so they cling to simple answers, even when those answers are wrong. Critical thinkers learn to live with uncertainty. They accept that sometimes the best we can do is make a decision with incomplete information, while remaining ready to adjust as new evidence appears. This flexibility is not weakness, it is strength, because it allows us to adapt to reality, rather than force reality to fit our expectation. Let us consider an example. Imagine you are evaluating whether to change careers. On the one hand, your current job provides stability and income. On the other hand, you feel unfulfilled and long for something more meaningful. The information available is incomplete. You cannot know with certainty whether a new career will bring greater satisfaction, nor can you guarantee success. A simplistic thinker might say, stay where you are, it is safe, or leave immediately, follow your passion. A critical thinker accepts the complexity, weighing financial needs, personal fulfillment, long-term goals, risks, and opportunities. They may seek advice, research the field, test small steps, and prepare contingencies. They do not eliminate uncertainty, but they manage it with thoughtful awareness. Another example can be drawn from everyday life, deciding what news to believe. One article may say a new health trend is revolutionary, another may say it is dangerous. Instead of choosing the version that feels most appealing, the critical thinker digs deeper. Who wrote the articles? Were the studies reliable? Do other credible sources confirm the information? They may conclude that the truth is more nuanced than either article suggested. In this way, they avoid being trapped by the oversimplification that often dominates media. One of the greatest dangers in a complex world is polarization. People often retreat into echo chambers where they only hear voices that agree with them. This simplifies complexity by turning it into a battle of us versus them. But polarization does not solve problems, it makes them worse. Critical thinking challenges us to resist this temptation. It encourages us to engage with opposing perspectives, not to accept them blindly, but to understand them. By doing so, we may find common ground, or at least a clearer sense of where real differences lie. In a complex world, unity does not come from ignoring disagreements, but from addressing them with honesty and respect. The practice of thinking critically in complexity also requires humility. No matter how much we know, no individual can fully grasp the vast web of forces that shape the modern world. Humility means admitting what we do not know, remaining open to learning, and valuing the contributions of others. It is the opposite of arrogance, which assumes that one perspective is complete. Humility allows us to keep growing, even when the world feels overwhelming. Finally, to think critically in a complex world is to cultivate resilience. Complexity often brings change, and change often brings disruption. Plans fail, systems break, and the unexpected happens. A critical thinker does not collapse in the face of disruption. They adapt, learn, and continue moving forward. They understand that clarity is not always about finding perfect solutions, but about navigating uncertainty with wisdom and patience. In the end, thinking in a complex world is less about solving everything and more about learning how to engage with complexity without fear. It is about asking better questions, seeking deeper understanding, and making thoughtful choices, even when the path is not clear. It is about recognizing that the world is interconnected, that every decision has consequences, and that wisdom requires both logic and empathy. By practicing these skills, filtering information, embracing systems thinking, tolerating ambiguity, resisting polarization, practicing humility, and building resilience, we become not just better thinkers, but stronger human beings. We move from being overwhelmed by complexity to being able to navigate it with confidence. And in doing so, we discover that complexity, far from being a burden, can be a source of growth, creativity, and deeper meaning. This is the essence of thinking in a complex world, not to run from it, not to simplify it falsely, but to meet it with clarity, courage, and an open mind. When we learn to do this, we prepare ourselves not only to survive in the modern world, but to thrive in it. Chapter 7: The Mindset of a Critical Thinker. If there is one truth about critical thinking, it is this: it is not just a skill, it is a mindset. Skills are techniques we can apply when needed, like using a calculator for math or following a recipe to cook a meal. A mindset, however, is a way of being. It shapes how we approach life, how we react to challenges, and how we see ourselves and others. A skill can be turned on and off, but a mindset stays with us, guiding our thoughts and actions every day. To become a true critical thinker, we must cultivate this mindset, a way of living and thinking that is grounded in curiosity, humility, patience, courage, and openness. It is not about being perfect or always right. It is about learning to see the world in a clearer, deeper, and more thoughtful way. In this chapter, we will explore what it means to develop the mindset of a critical thinker, how it transforms daily life, and how it empowers us to create meaningful success. At the foundation of this mindset is curiosity. Critical thinkers are endlessly curious. They are not satisfied with surface-level answers, and they resist the temptation of easy conclusions. Where others stop asking questions, they ask more. When faced with a fact, they want to know how it came to be, who discovered it, what evidence supports it, and how it connects to other truths. Curiosity is the fuel that keeps the critical thinker's mind active. Without curiosity, thinking becomes stagnant, and we fall back into mental autopilot. But with curiosity, the world becomes alive with possibilities. Even the most ordinary experiences, a conversation, a news story, a simple observation, can spark questions that lead to growth. Yet curiosity alone is not enough. A true critical thinker also embodies humility. Humility means acknowledging the limits of one's own knowledge. It means being willing to admit, "I don't know," and to seek out answers rather than pretend expertise. This is not a weakness, but a strength, because humility keeps the mind open to learning. Those who lack humility often cling stubbornly to their opinions, even when faced with strong evidence to the contrary. They fear that admitting ignorance or error will make them look weak. In reality, the refusal to acknowledge limits makes a person fragile, because their beliefs cannot adapt to new realities. A humble thinker, by contrast, is flexible. They can adjust their views without losing their identity. They are less concerned with appearing right and more concerned with becoming wise. Patience is another cornerstone of the critical thinker's mindset. Our culture often rewards quick answers and fast results. In such an environment, patience can feel old-fashioned, but critical thinking takes time. It requires careful observation, deep questioning, and reflection. Rushed judgments often lead to mistakes, while patient consideration opens the way for deeper insight. A patient thinker does not panic when answers are not immediately clear. They are willing to hold uncertainty, to wrestle with complex ideas, and to wait for clarity to emerge. This patience is not passive, it is active engagement with the process of discovery. Courage is equally vital. Thinking critically often means questioning what others take for granted. It means speaking up when the majority prefers silence, and challenging assumptions that feel comfortable but may be false. This can be uncomfortable, even risky. Socrates was condemned for his questioning. Galileo faced persecution for challenging accepted beliefs. In everyday life too, critical thinkers may face criticism when they refuse to simply go along with the crowd. Courage allows them to stand firm, not for the sake of being different, but for the sake of truth. It is the courage to say, "I may be alone in this view, but I believe it is worth examining." Without courage, critical thinking remains trapped in the private mind. With courage, it becomes a force for change in the world. Openness is another defining trait. A critical thinker is open to perspectives beyond their own. They do not see disagreement as a threat, but as an opportunity to grow. Openness does not mean accepting every idea as equally true. Rather, it means being willing to listen carefully, to test ideas fairly, and to give them honest consideration. Closed minds cannot learn, but open minds can expand without losing their core values. In today's polarized world, openness is rare but essential. It creates space for dialogue instead of division, for understanding instead of hostility. Together, these traits, curiosity, humility, patience, courage, and openness, form the core of the critical thinker's mindset. But this mindset is not built overnight. It grows through daily practice, through small habits that gradually reshape the way we think. Let us imagine how this looks in everyday life. Consider a simple conversation with a friend. Most people listen just enough to prepare their response. A critical thinker listens deeply, curious about what lies behind the words. They ask thoughtful questions instead of rushing to assumptions. They remain open to the possibility that their friend's perspective may reveal something new. If they feel tempted to interrupt with their own opinion, they exercise patience and wait. If the conversation challenges their beliefs, they use humility to acknowledge it rather than becoming defensive. And if their view differs strongly, they summon the courage to share their perspective respectfully. Through these small habits, the mindset of a critical thinker comes alive. Or take the example of reading the news. A passive reader accepts the headline and moves on. A critical thinker, by contrast, approaches the news with curiosity. What is the source? What evidence is given? What might be missing? They apply humility by admitting when they do not know enough and seeking more information. They remain open to multiple sides of the story, even those that conflict with their initial beliefs. They exercise patience by reading carefully, not rushing to judgment. And if the information points to a conclusion that is unpopular, they have the courage to accept it anyway. Again, the mindset reveals itself in action. The mindset of a critical thinker also extends to problem-solving and decision-making, which we explored in earlier chapters. But here, the difference lies not just in the techniques used, but in the attitude behind them. A critical thinker does not treat problems as nuisances to be endured, but as opportunities to practice growth. They do not fear making decisions in uncertainty, but accept it as part of life. They approach both challenges and opportunities with curiosity, humility, patience, courage, and openness, turning every moment into a chance to strengthen their mind. Importantly, the mindset of a critical thinker brings freedom. When we lack this mindset, we are often controlled by external forces, by the pressure of popular opinion, by the pull of emotions, or by the authority of others. We become reactive rather than reflective, followers rather than leaders of our own lives. But when we cultivate the critical thinker's mindset, we reclaim control. We learn to trust our ability to examine, question, and decide. We become less vulnerable to manipulation, less afraid of difference, and more confident in navigating uncertainty. This mindset also shapes the way we see success. Many people measure success by external markers, wealth, status, recognition. But critical thinkers see success differently. They measure it by the quality of their decisions, the depth of their understanding, and the integrity with which they live. For them, success is not about always being right, but about always striving for clarity and truth. This is why so many of history's great innovators, leaders, and thinkers share this mindset. It gave them the strength to pursue their vision, even when the world doubted them, and it allowed them to leave a legacy that endures beyond their lifetime. Developing this mindset requires conscious effort. It begins with small choices, choosing to pause before reacting, to ask one more question, to listen more closely, to admit one's limits, to explore another perspective, to act with courage even when afraid. Over time, these small choices accumulate, shaping a mind that naturally approaches life with clarity and depth. Imagine how different your life could be if this mindset guided your every thought and action. Challenges would no longer feel overwhelming, but would be approached with calm curiosity. Conflicts would become opportunities for understanding rather than battles to win. Decisions would bring greater peace because they would be grounded in clarity rather than confusion, and success would feel more meaningful because it would be built not on chance, but on thoughtful intention. The mindset of a critical thinker is not reserved for philosophers or scholars. It is available to everyone. It does not require special talent, only the willingness to practice daily habits of curiosity, humility, patience, courage, and openness. By choosing this mindset, you choose to live differently. You choose to see the world not as a blur of noise and confusion, but as a landscape of ideas, challenges, and opportunities waiting to be explored. This is the gift of the critical thinker's mindset. It turns thinking from a tool into a way of life. It empowers us to move through the complexity of the modern world with strength and clarity, and it reminds us that while we cannot always control the circumstances we face, we can always control how we think about them, and that in the end changes everything. Chapter 8. Change your thinking, change your life. There is a simple but profound truth that sits at the heart of human experience. The way you think shapes the way you live. Your thoughts guide your decisions guide your actions, and your actions create the life you experience. When your thinking is clouded by confusion, bias, or fear, your life will reflect those patterns. But when your thinking is clear, grounded, and courageous, the possibilities for your life expand beyond measure. To change your thinking is to open the door to a new way of being. This is not just a motivational phrase, It is a reality proven again and again in the lives of those who dared to transform their minds. Throughout this book, we have explored the many dimensions of critical thinking, from breaking free of mental traps, to making decisions with clarity, to solving problems, and to navigating the complexity of the modern world. But all of these skills and practices lead us to this final, most powerful idea: when you master your thinking, you master your life. The transformation begins inside, but its effects ripple outward into every area of existence: relationships, careers, health, and even the way you see the world itself. Think of the people who have shaped history in profound ways. Their circumstances varied widely. Some were born into privilege, others into poverty. Some lived in times of peace, others in eras of turmoil. Yet what united them was not their background, but their mindset. They looked at the world differently. Where others saw obstacles, they saw opportunities. Where others saw final answers, they saw deeper questions. Where others conformed, they challenged. By changing their thinking, they changed not only their own lives, but the lives of countless others. Take, for example, Nelson Mandela. Imprisoned for decades, he could have let bitterness consume him. Yet he chose a different way of thinking. He chose to view his suffering as preparation for leadership, to see his enemies not only as opponents, but as fellow human beings. That way of thinking allowed him to emerge from prison, not with vengeance, but with a vision for reconciliation. His changed way of thinking led to the transformation of an entire nation. Or consider Malala Yousafzai, who as a young girl faced violence simply for seeking an education. Where many might have chosen silence out of fear, she thought differently. She believed that education was worth the risk, that her voice mattered, and that one person could spark change. That thinking gave her the courage to speak out, and her words ignited a global movement. Again, it was not just circumstances that determined her path, but the way she chose to think about them. These examples may feel extraordinary, but the same principle applies to each of us in our daily lives. Imagine someone who constantly tells themselves, "I am not smart enough, not talented enough, not lucky enough." This way of thinking shapes their actions. They hesitate to try new things. They avoid challenges. They give up quickly. Their life reflects their mindset. Now imagine the same person deciding to think differently. "I can learn, I can grow, I can keep trying until I succeed." This shift does not magically remove obstacles, but it changes how they respond to them. Instead of giving up, they persist. Instead of avoiding challenges, they embrace them. Over time, this new way of thinking leads to new results, new opportunities, and a new life. Changing your thinking begins with awareness. You must first notice the thoughts that run through your mind each day. Many of them are habits formed years ago, picked up from parents, teachers, culture, or past experiences. Some serve you well, but others hold you back. By observing your thoughts, you begin to see the patterns, the doubts, the fears, the assumptions, the shortcuts. Once you see them, you gain the power to question them. Is this thought true? Is it helpful? Is it leading me toward the life I want, or keeping me trapped in the life I fear? The second step is replacing limiting thoughts with empowering ones. This does not mean denying reality or pretending everything is positive. It means choosing to frame reality in ways that create strength rather than weakness. Instead of saying, "This problem is impossible," you say, "This problem is difficult, but I can learn how to approach it." Instead of saying, "I always fail," you say, "Each failure is a lesson that prepares me for success." Instead of saying, "I have no control," you say, "I cannot control everything, but I can control how I respond." These shifts in thinking change the energy with which you meet life. The third step is practice. Changing your thinking is not a one-time event. It is a daily discipline, like exercise or learning a language. At first, the old thoughts will return. because they are familiar and comfortable. But with practice, the new patterns grow stronger. Over time, you find yourself naturally approaching life with curiosity instead of fear, with resilience instead of defeat, with clarity instead of confusion. The change may be gradual, but it is lasting because it is built on practice. Critical thinking deepens this process. It gives you the tools not only to replace negative thoughts with positive ones, but to replace weak thinking with strong thinking. It teaches you to evaluate, analyze, and test ideas rather than simply accept them. It trains you to distinguish between feelings and facts, between appearances and reality. In doing so, it gives you a foundation of clarity on which to build your life. The result of changing your thinking is not only personal growth, but freedom. Freedom from being controlled by fear, freedom from being misled by manipulation, freedom from repeating mistakes without learning, freedom to live with intention rather than drift. When you change your thinking, you gain the ability to shape your own destiny instead of letting others or circumstances shape it for you. This transformation is not about becoming someone else, it is about becoming more fully yourself. Each of us carries within us potential that is often hidden by doubt, fear, or habit. Changing your thinking allows that potential to rise. It helps you see new possibilities, pursue new paths, and create a life that reflects your true values. In this way, changing your thinking is not only about success in the external world, but about fulfillment in the inner world. As we close this book, remember this: critical thinking is not a set of abstract ideas. It is a living practice that can change the course of your life. It begins with small steps, asking one more question, pausing before reacting, seeking one more perspective, admitting one more limit. Each step reshapes the way you see the world, and each reshaped thought reshapes the life you live. The choice is always yours. You cannot control everything that happens, but you can always choose how you think about it. That choice, repeated day after day, becomes the most powerful force in your life. Change your thinking, and you truly do change your life. And so let this be the invitation that stays with you. Never stop questioning, never stop learning, never stop refining the way you think. For in the quality of your thinking lies the quality of your life, and in the courage to think differently lies the power to create a future brighter than you ever imagined. Conclusion: the journey of a critical thinker. As we arrive at the conclusion of the critical thinkers, change the way you think, change your life, it is worth pausing to reflect on the journey we have taken together. We began with the power of thinking differently, seeing how history's greatest minds challenge assumptions and reshape the world. We examined the anatomy of critical thinking, the balance of analysis, evaluation, logic, and creativity, and we explored the hidden mental traps that cloud our judgment. We looked at how to make decisions with clarity, how to solve problems like a professional, how to navigate the complexity of the modern world, and finally, how to adopt the mindset of a true critical thinker. Through it all, one theme has remained constant: your thoughts shape your life. The way you think influences the choices you make, the relationships you build, the opportunities you recognize, and the way you respond to challenges. Critical thinking is not simply an intellectual skill, it is a way of living with intention. It allows you to step off the path of automatic habits and blind conformity, and instead choose a path guided by clarity, courage, and wisdom. The world will always be complex. Problems will always arise, uncertainty will always exist, and information will always come faster than we can fully process. But when you commit to being a critical thinker, you give yourself an anchor in the storm. You no longer need to be carried by the tide of confusion, because you have the tools to question, analyze, and decide. This does not mean you will never make mistakes. Mistakes are part of being human. What it means is that you will learn from those mistakes, adapt, and grow stronger with each step forward. Perhaps the most important lesson is that critical thinking is not a destination, but a lifelong practice. It is not something you master once and then put away. It is a daily choice, a habit of mind that grows deeper the more you use it. Each day offers opportunities to practice in the conversations you have, the decisions you make, the challenges you face. Every moment can be a chance to pause, to question, to reflect, and to think a little more clearly than before. As you move forward from this book, remember that being a critical thinker is not about always having the right answer. It is about asking the right questions. It is about approaching life with curiosity, humility, patience, courage, and openness. It is about refusing to accept that things must always be as they are and daring to imagine what they could be. In the end, to change your thinking is to change your life. When you think with clarity, you live with purpose. When you think with courage, you act with confidence. When you think with compassion, you connect more deeply with others. And when you think critically, you create not only a better life for yourself, but a brighter world for those around you. This is the journey of the critical thinker, a journey without end, but one filled with meaning. And it is now your journey to continue.